Carson Brun, Leroy Harris, and plenty other Kansas Jayhawks were winners in the snap count column in week 0 against Fresno State. We're going to tell you what it means for the rest of the season for this team right now, and also the QB2 battle continues to rage on.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day, and thank you to the everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe. And on today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we're talking the biggest snap count winners and losers from week 0 for KU's win over Fresno State. We'll start with the offense, move to the defense, and then touch a little bit on QB2, the battle that continues to rage on, and I think is really going to rage on this week against Wagner in KU's FCS game on Friday. Let's start with the offense. I thought the biggest winner in snap count for KU was Carson Brun. We'll get into some of the offensive line, some of the receiver stuff, but coming into the game, you had Deshaun Hanika as the starter, and then you had 3 guys listed as oars between Leighton Cure, Carson Brun, and Bowden Grown from Rice, the transfer. And it seemed like Carson Brun was on a big-time upward arrow, but it was like, okay, where is that going to specifically fit in? Like, are we talking about him just starting to get snaps now because, he's still just a redshirt freshman, or are we talking about something more than that? And I think we found out in this first game, it is something more than that. He actually led tight ends in snaps, even above Deshaun Hanika. Deshaun Hanika played 20 snaps. Carson Brun played 30. Now, Carson Brun, younger player. Deshaun Hanika's had some injury stuff in the past. I still believe that Deshaun Hanika is above Carson Brun on the depth chart. But here's what I really find interesting. And this is something that Lance Leipold echoed in his Monday press conference, talking about Carson Brun being the best inline tight end blocker for KU. When you look at Deshaun Hanika, and you even go back to his time at Iowa State, more of a receiving tight end than a blocking tight end. Still fine blocking, but better receiver than a blocker as a tight end goes. For Carson Brun, if you're the best blocker, there is a chance that Brun ends up out-snapping Hanika, that it just ends up being kind of a situational type thing, right? If you want more of that Y tight end would be kind of the term on it, somebody who's going to kind of flex out into the slot, so to speak, and be more of a receiver, that's going to be Hanika. If you want more of your inline blocking tight end, maybe that ends up being Brun a little bit more. And from that standpoint, maybe he does end up being technically the first tight end, even though Hanika would be the first tight end in terms of receiving yards and receptions and stuff like that. But I think you're going to see a lot of them on the field together because that's kind of a perfect complement, right? You have the receiving guy, you have the blocking guy, and it kind of works similar to – now, Mason Fairchild actually was a solid blocker for KU his last couple of years at Kansas. Some of the PFF grades kind of bear that out. But a kind of similar tandem to the idea of, okay, Mason Fairchild, more your receiving tight end, even though, again, he was a good, blocker. With Jared Casey, more of the, blocking tight end. Jared Casey had really good hands too. So, again, both of them could do both, but that was kind of the idea in their role. And maybe that ends up being the case for these 2 guys. What else is interesting, Carson Brun, and this goes back to the inline blocking thing, 24 of those 30 snaps came in line. So this is not necessarily if you're not playing as an inline tight end, maybe you're playing off the line. Maybe that means you're the 3rd tight end in the set. The fact that he was really shows that, I am talking myself into more and more like maybe by the time we get to the end of the season, he is the tight end 1 for KU. But again, I think it's kind of a 1A, 1B situation with Hanika and Brun. But right now, there's still the oars on the depth chart with Brun and the other guys. Maybe by the end of the year, it's Hanika or Brun. And again, it just kind of depends on the situation. But really cool there. And like I've said before, he's the final parting gift of Andy Kotelnicki that he left for KU. Okay, Amir Herring is a big winner, as well as Enrique Cruz, if we're looking at snap counts. Now, I think if we're looking at just how the performance went, that's a different conversation compared to the guys that they were going up against in the competition. But it is clear that they were given the first reps. Amir Herring was given 45 snaps at left guard. Tavaki Tuiko-Lovato was given only 15. Now, Herring did not necessarily take advantage of those to the mastered degree, just a 54.8 PFF grade, just a 24 pass block grade, 58 run block grade. He also had a penalty in there, right? So left a little bit to be desired, but clearly by snap count, he was well ahead of Tavaki Tuiko-Lovato. When you look at Enrique Cruz at the right tackle spot, he had 43 snaps. Nolan Gorsica only had 17. Cruz only had a 56.3 PFF grade. He was a little better, though, 62 pass block, 61 run block. The reason his grade is similarly close to Herring, even though he has better numbers there, is he had 2 penalties compared to the 1 for Herring. So not a clean game from either guy, but it was clear they were given more of the reps ahead of the other guy. Now, Gorsica graded out actually pretty solid on PFF, so it'll be interesting to see if some of the playing time gets eaten into a little bit for one or both of those guys against Wagner, or if they're just given more time and say that, hey, listen, this is their first start. Like, it's going to take some time to gel. It's going to take some time to kind of get to the point that they want to be. And over the majority of fall camp, which is a longer period of time than one specific game, even though, the game film matters the most, those were the guys. And so from that perspective, it'll be very interesting because the snap count would say one thing, the performance would say that it's actually pretty close still between those guys. So very interesting what that means coming Friday night against Wagner. And then the receiver position is the last one I want to touch on the offensive side of the football. Obviously Cam Pickett getting banged up is going to help the snap count for some other guys, because I think Cam Pickett ended up, I forget if it was 4th or 5th in snap count for receivers for KU in this game. He ends up being the leader in receptions and receiving yards and receiving touchdowns for Kansas, but he just got banged up. Like, that's why. Like, Cam Pickett is going to be one of your top 2 highest, if not highest, snap count guys. It's going to be Henderson and Pickett. Like, those are probably going to be your top 2 guys in snap count. And in fact, on the depth chart that came out this week, he's still listed as an or as the starter, but he's now the guy on top. And what we've learned from the Lance Leipold staff is if there's 2 guys, if there's an or, yes, maybe that means they're both going to get playing time or that there's going to be a rotation, but the guy who is on top of that or usually is the one who is like the actual starter or is going to get maybe a hair more playing time than the other one. But anyway, outside of that, Levi Wentz and Keaton Kubeka would be winners here. Now, Kubeka obviously caught the touchdown, so that was cool. And I saw a little breakdown of the play call. I think it was Dan Casey was the coach who does really good work on social media and Twitter. And he kind of broke down the play call, and it was cool, like the little zig route that Kubeka ran and the concept they ran to get him open in the middle of the field, and obviously a strike thrown between a couple guys in zones against the Fresno State defense. And so that was cool to see with Kubeka. Obviously still just a redshirt sophomore, right? Because he becomes somebody who it's not just important what his role is this year. It becomes important, are you going to be one of the starters next year? Are you going to feel comfortable with his performance this year that you go, okay, yeah, we feel good that Kubeka and Pickett are our top 2 receivers next year, or whatever it ends up being. But I think Wentz and Kubeka both stick out here. So for Wentz, he had 36 snaps. That was second most of receivers. Only Emmanuel Henderson had more. So it's pretty clear that Levi Wentz has established himself to that degree. You also get Keaton Kubeka with 28 snaps, which is the 3rd most of receivers. And again, he also had that touchdown. So when you're looking at how do you sort these things out and where was Doug Emelian going to come in, it seems like Kubeka and Wentz ahead of Emelian. Now, the one wild card that could change this up for the future part of the season, I guess beyond the health of Cam Pickett, is the health of Bryson Canty. Now, Canty only played 4 snaps in this game for KU. He's the transfer from Columbia who, if we're talking about career production at what they did, he was the most productive receiver that Kansas added via the transfer portal. He had to deal with some injuries during fall camp. He just started to come back at practice leading to the week of the game. And so he only gets 4 snaps, but that's why. He's clearly one of those guys who, based on production, experience, and talent, if he gets back into the swing of things, he could easily usurp a lot of these guys and get a lot more playing time. So how does that affect it? Or does the fact that guys like Wentz and Kubeka, that they've started to get more playing time, if they continue to perform well, do they just stay in front of him? So that'll be kind of the big wild card. But yeah, Wentz and Kubeka, I think if you're looking at the top 4 receivers on the team right now, yeah, it's those 2 guys plus Henderson and Pickett. And then it's kind of Emelian and where's Canty going to fit into things? I guess you'd say Bryce Cohoon would be in that next group as well, for kind of the 5, 6, 7, but seemingly those top guys as kind of the top 4 is what it looked like after week 0, but obviously still a lot of games and practices and plenty more that's going to be decided from there. All right, let's move to the defense side of the ball. Who are some of the biggest winners from week 0 for KU football? Today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. August 26th, hey, that's today. If you're listening to this on Tuesday, is officially FanDuel's Future Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. And with FanDuel, too, you can get futures even still on the college football season. I mentioned the other day, Kansas going off now at the same odds as Kansas State to win the Big 12, both at 11-1. You can even get college basketball futures early on the season where Kansas is 20-1 to win the national title. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find Locked On College Football for a second listen every day. Don't forget to check out some of our recap episodes talking KU Fresno State. We'll be back with some more KU basketball talk tomorrow, doing our Wings preview. Took a week off last week with the first week of the football season, but we'll be back to that on tomorrow's episode. All right, biggest snap count winners for the defensive side of the football for the Kansas Jayhawks. And let's start with Austin Alexander. Now, I know DJ Graham did not play, and I'm assuming that's because of injury, because I know he was banged up in fall camp. But Austin Alexander played 50 snaps. That is the second most snaps on the defense. Jalen Todd had the most, which was just like one or two snaps more than him. But he locked it down. He was the guy at the outside of the corner. He also played well. He had a 70 coverage grade in the process. So when Graham does come back, I don't think it is a guarantee that Graham, just by experience, usurps Austin Alexander. And in fact, on this week's depth chart, because last week's depth chart, I want to say it was an or with Alexander and Graham. This week's depth chart, it's just Alexander above DJ Graham. Now, again, what is the health status of DJ Graham? I don't know, but I think Austin Alexander is really taken off. And I think the fact that, like, if he would have played 30 snaps in that game where he's rotating with another guy, to me, that would be indicative of, okay, he's leaving it open. Like, this is an open competition. They're seeing what they got there, and they want to find. The fact that he got that many snaps tells me that the staff is like, no, this is our guy. We are going with him. And I think that's an exciting thing, because he is arguably he's one of the 2 or 3 most talented guys in that room. Maybe he's the most talented guy. If you just go back to like high school recruiting and the fact that he was a high-rated recruit, but he was also somebody who people were saying was a diamond in the rough, even though he's a high-rated recruit. Now, Jalen Todd, that was also kind of the rub on him too. So he might be up there. But like, point being, if you're looking to replace that room with as much talent as possible, because you're not going to replace the experience of Kobe and Melo, you just want as much talent as possible, he certainly fits into that billing. Leroy Harris III is a big winner here. 31 snaps for Leroy Harris III. He came in as a transfer from Tennessee Chattanooga, where he played. He was a FCS like freshman All-American. Played in a lot of games, didn't have like huge stats, but you know, he got some good experience in year one. He transfers up to Kansas, and it's like, okay, you have a guy who clearly has some talent and was able to produce here, but he's still really young. And, you know, it's not like he had multiple sacks last year at UT Chattanooga. It's like, okay, maybe he'll be like the 3rd or 4th string this year, develop, and then maybe he'll be on the 2 deep next year, and then maybe he'll be a starter the year after. No, this dude is basically, he's on the 2 deep now. He's playing big snaps now. Maybe he'll be a starter next year. Like, I don't know. Sky's the limit for Leroy Harris III. Seems to be very lengthy, seems to be a good athlete. Seems like Kansas found themselves another diamond in the rough at the defensive end position with Leroy Harris III. They've had success with diamond in the rough's defensive ends in the Lance Leipold era. They've also had success with guys who are named Harris with a numeral after their name. After was Chris Harris the 4th or the 3rd? I can't remember. Anyway, so you have Leroy Harris III and 31 snaps. He played a good game to boot to go with it. I think he's just going to be somebody like, I think Kansas is at a point where they just have a lot more defensive end depth this year than they have had in a long. Because think about it. You think of week 0 and they're doing it without Dean Miller, and like Alex Bray and Justice Finkley are both making impacts. You have Leroy Harris. You have this next guy that I'm going to talk about, Dak Brinkley. And once you get Dean Miller back, like there's more defensive end depth. Like maybe Kansas doesn't have an Austin Booker or a Lonnie Phelps. Maybe they do. That'd be great. But maybe they just have more depth. Maybe they have just a little overall. And that would bring us to Dak Brinkley. 29 snaps for him, 71 PFF grade. Between those two, that's a lot of youth, which is awesome for the future. It raises your potential because both those guys are really good athletes and what they could raise the ceiling of this team and the defense to be. So really excited there for both Harris and Brinkley, what they could become on this defense, whether it's now and or in the future. Mason Ellis is a winner. You know, he was, I forget if it was the 2nd or 3rd on the Hawk position, but we kind of mentioned that it seemed like it was sorted based on, do you want to play a 3rd linebacker? Do you want to play a 3rd safety, or do you want to play a 3rd DB? It ended up being Mason Ellis played the most of anyone listed at Hawk. 27 snaps. Saeed Gibbs played at 22, but a lot of those were as kind of a slot corner. So it's kind of dependent on position. Jason Gilliam did not play. I don't know if that was injury or what, but Mason Ellis, he's now listed as a starter on the depth chart for the Hawk position, played well enough local kid, Kansas kid, who's a really good athlete. And so that was cool to see. He's obviously a winner out of all this. I thought Alex Bray was a big winner. I mean, Justice Finkley, I thought I had some good moments in setting the edge and being kind of the adult in the room, so to speak, for KU. But Bray only played 26 less snaps than Justice Finkley. And I do think that's intentional for both guys. They want to keep both fresh over the course of the season. So if you have kind of a close to 50-50, 55-45, 60-40 split, like that's a good thing for both players because you keep them as fresh as possible and they can be as effective as possible. But that only works if both guys are playing well. And so Alex Bray did play well. I think he was a big winner, though, in showing that, yeah, when he's playing well, like he's basically going to get the same amount of snaps that Finkley is, or it's going to be close. John Kamara, you hear so many great stories about the athleticism and the just freak athlete that John Kamara is. And, you figured he would develop into something, but it almost still felt like, okay, well, when is it going to happen? Is it going to be in 2026? Is it going to be in 2027? And turns out he gets 19 snaps in this game. He listed on the 2 deep as the backup, but it's also like, okay, how much is he going to get in there? You can't keep him off the field because he's just that good of an athlete. So I think playing time is going to be huge for him when he can get it, because if he is this freak athlete and you're just looking to get him seasoning and playing experience, like finding those times where you can get him in the game, I think are going to be so important because he could be an absolute monster and a freak, a guy that, normally you don't see at the University of Kansas. You don't see the athletes of John Kamara. So I think cool there. And then the last winner, another linebacker, Ezra Vidral, who I think is a walk-on. He had 12 snaps. I don't know what this means in terms of is it because other guys are injured? Is it is that a bad sign for some of the other linebackers like your Logan Brantley's of the world? That they, you had a walk-on in front of them, or was it just kind of dependent on the idea of, okay, you have this walk-on who's worked really hard and you're up big late, you're going to get him in the game. It felt like he was in there pretty early though, for that to be the case. So I do think he's kind of a winner that maybe he's inched his way up the depth chart as a former walk-on, and what that means for the other guys. Yeah, that might be a little bit of a question there for those others. All right. The QB2 battle continued on into the week 0 game. It's going to definitely continue on into week 1 against Wagner, because ideally Kansas will win by a lot. They'll be able to bring in the backup. They'll be able to bring in the backup to the backup. So I want to talk more about the QB2 battle next. This is Locked on Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Rougiette. You've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rougiette Ready. Rougiette Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rougiette's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast. On average, in just 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment's right. You can even read real customer reviews on their website. It's helping a lot of people feel more confident and present in the moment. Head to Rougiette.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege. Rougiette.com/LockedOnCollege. Use promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rougiette website for full safety information. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked on Jayhawks. Again, check out Locked on College Football for second listen every day. You can even check out Locked on College Basketball. Stay with the pulse of that as well with, I don't know, it feels like college basketball, the season gets closer and closer every year. I don't know why. They've talked about expanding the regular season. That would certainly make it closer every year, which I'd be game for. But anyway, you can check out those as well. So make sure you subscribe to all of us. Okay, the QB2 battle definitely going to continue this week in week 1, KU's second game against Wagner. We got to see a taste of it in week 1. Now, we didn't really get to see either player. Like, it's not like Cole Ballard's like uncorking deep balls when the score's 31-7, and then Isaiah Marshall's throwing like laser beam post routes or something. But we did get to see, a little bit of both guys in there. We did get to see Isaiah Marshall's speed in the open field, and I don't necessarily think we've gotten to see it like that 13-yard run he had. He looked really fast. He looked really quick. That was cool to see that he kind of had that in him. So we got to see a little bit there. But again, nothing that you can really pull away and be like, definitively, this guy's better than that guy. Not really. So that's why this next game is hopefully going to be the best and most, accurate evaluation of both. Because if you look at the snap count from the game for both, I think it's Marshall 4 snaps, Ballard 3 snaps, but obviously Ballard was in first. Ballard's still listed as the backup quarterback. But this is the one where it could matter. Now, it all depends on KU taking care of business. If KU plays with their food here and it's 38-21 with 7 minutes left, you're not going to have time to go to your second and third string quarterback. In fact, you might not even have time to go to your second string quarterback, right? Because you want to finish out the game. But if Kansas is up, 35-0 at halftime, and then you get a stop to start the second half, do you bring in the second string offense? And then all of a sudden it's 45-0 coming in the fourth quarter. Do you bring in the third string offense? At that point, and that's what you want to have happen. You want the young guys to get reps. You want to see what you have in some game situations, both in terms of getting those players experience, also dangling the carrot in front of their face where they feel like, hey, I got into a game. Now I'm more motivated in practice, right? And then on top of that, it's also the standpoint of just the staff, it's an evaluation for everyone, right? Like from the players, they want to get tape out there. If anybody transfers at the end of the year, they'd love to have some tape. From the Kansas perspective, they want to know what they got. You want to know, some guys are better game players than they are practice players. And you want to know what you got so that when you get to the transfer portal season in December and January, hey, I trust this guy to develop into that position. We don't need to add someone who's a ready-made starter there via the transfer portal. Let's just go for somebody with depth. Or I don't feel good about that position. Let's go attack it in the transfer portal. You need to know those things. And so the quarterback is clearly one of those. I think to me, it's more important that Isaiah Marshall does well in the week 0 game against Wagner than Cole Ballard, because it seems like Cole Ballard is the more consistent, better practice player between the two. We've talked about this before. There are certain quarterbacks, I think Carter Stanley has been somebody who's been public that he was better in games than practice. I know in the early part of Jalen Daniels' career, that was something that seemed to be the case that I remember talking to him and he'd be like, yeah, sometimes in practice, I'm just testing to see what I can get away with, which sounds great. And it's worked out great for him because he's had a great career at Kansas, but also think about it. If you're the backup quarterback and you're throwing a bunch of picks because you're testing to see what you get, the coaching staff isn't going to be like, oh, he must be testing to see what he's going to get away with. They might just be like, why is he throwing so many picks? Todd Reesing was the same way. He was not somebody who was known as a good practice player, right? Some players are better in games than they are in practice. And so maybe that's the case with Cole Ballard versus Isaiah Marshall. So this is the opportunity. If Marshall's a gamer, go out there and be a gamer. Go out there and perform. Go out there and make it so that the staff has to go, oh man, that was really, really impressive. Maybe we should reconsider him being the backup quarterback. And again, if Cole Ballard ends up being the guy, I've kind of said all the way along, I do think people have underrated at this point Cole Ballard just because of the former walk-on tagline. I do think he's better than people give credit for. But still acknowledging that, who probably has the higher ceiling? Maybe the higher floor is Cole Ballard, but who has the higher ceiling long-term? It's still hard for me not to say it's the guy who was a near 4-star recruit that, was winning the state title in the state of Michigan, right? And so from that perspective, I would love Isaiah Marshall to get in late and not too late, get in the game and ball out and really impress. And hopefully Cole Ballard balls out too, but hopefully Isaiah Marshall comes in there and both of them are so good that the quarterback competition is just man, we don't know who to make backup quarterback because both of them are that good. And we'll see if that ends up happening. But yeah, I do think it's a very, very important game for Isaiah Marshall. Obviously it's important for Cole Ballard too, but I think even more so because Ballard does seem to have the edge when it just comes down to practice. So who's going to have the edge when it comes down to a game? All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And we'll see you next time for another edition. More KU football talk later this week with the KU Wagner preview. We've also got our KU basketball wings preview coming at you on tomorrow's episode. See you then on LOJ.